The small restaurant was bustling with the usual evening crowd. The clinking of plates and soft chatter filled the air, and a faint smell of fried food mixed with coffee lingered in every corner. In the middle of this ordinary scene worked Lena, a quiet woman who had spent most of her life in the shadows of others. She moved carefully between tables, wiping surfaces and refilling glasses with a precision born from years of practice. She spoke little, always smiling politely when someone acknowledged her, but never adding more than a few words. Most people thought of her as gentle, simple, someone who lived quietly and without any extraordinary talent. They could not have been more wrong. Lena had always been aware of the way people looked at her. There was a certain softness in her eyes, a hesitance in her movements, and a way she seemed almost invisible unless someone truly paid attention. She had grown used to it. She didn't mind the quiet life she led, and she had accepted that her days would be spent doing small, ordinary things. She had her routines, her little joys, and for her, that had been enough. Yet on this particular evening, something unexpected was about to unfold that would challenge the assumptions of everyone around her. The restaurant staff had gathered after the dinner rush, and the mood was light and playful. There was laughter, chatter, and the occasional teasing that always seemed to find its way into any group of coworkers. Lena had joined in minimally, offering small smiles, but staying mostly to herself. She knew that the playful jokes and teasing were harmless, yet she often felt like the target of subtle mockery, simply because she didn't speak as much as others. That evening, it seemed her quiet demeanor had caught the attention of a few of the younger staff members, who decided to have some fun at her expense. "Hey, Lana," one of them called, smirking. "You're always so quiet. Bet you don't even know how to have any real fun." There was a tinge of laughter in the voice, but it carried a hint of challenge. "I wonder, can you even do anything interesting?" Lena paused for a moment, her hands stilling on the glass she had been polishing. She looked up, meeting their gaze, and simply shook her head with a soft smile. I just do my work," she said quietly, her voice almost lost amid the chatter of the others. Another staff member, more daring than the first, leaned in closer, a teasing sparkle in their eyes. "Oh, come on. Everyone has a hidden talent, right? Maybe you can sing or dance or do something amazing. Let's see it." Their tone was playful, but there was an edge of expectation, the kind that makes people feel cornered. Lena felt a small pang of discomfort. She had long ago learned to avoid situations like this. Showcasing herself had never been a priority, and the thought of performing in front of a crowd, even a small one of coworkers, made her uneasy. But before she could respond, a third voice joined in, louder and more insistent. Wait. I have an idea," they said, pointing toward the dusty piano in the corner of the room. The old instrument had sat there for years, mostly ignored, a relic of a time when someone thought live music would add charm to the restaurant. Now it was worn, its keys slightly yellowed with age, but it still held a certain dignity. "Let's make her play. I bet she can't even hit a single note without messing it up." Laughter erupted around them, directed squarely at Lena. She swallowed hard, feeling the eyes of the group on her. The teasing was meant to be light-hearted, but it stung more than she wanted to admit. She shook her head quickly, stepping back. I haven't played in years," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. "Please, I don't want to." But the teasing only grew stronger. "Oh, come on, don't be shy. We just want to see if a quiet little girl like you can actually do something real for once." The words were sharp, but Lena noticed the way they were spoken with laughter, almost as if they themselves didn't believe they were being cruel. Still, the pressure built, the group nudging her forward, and the quiet corner of the restaurant suddenly felt like a stage. For a moment, Lena felt a rush of memories flood her mind. The piano, the keys, The music, it all came back as if it had never left her. She remembered sitting on the same kind of bench in her village, playing melodies that her parents would hum along to. She remembered losing herself in music, the way her fingers could dance across keys, while her heart felt lighter and freer than anywhere else in the world. She had loved music more than anything, but life had forced her onto a different path. She had given up her lessons, her dreams, and her time with the piano to survive, to work, to keep her life steady and simple. And yet, here it was, the piano, dusty but waiting, calling to her in a way she hadn't expected. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the sudden swirl of emotions. She didn't want to perform. She didn't want attention. And yet, she also didn't want to be the person who simply cowered under ridicule. The laughter and the teasing had become almost unbearable, and a small, quiet voice inside her whispered, "Just do it. Show them who you really are, even if it's just for a moment." Reluctantly, Lena walked toward the piano. The laughter followed her, light and mocking, but she focused on the keys, brushing her fingers lightly over the smooth surfaces. The first touch sent a shiver through her, a mixture of fear, nostalgia, and anticipation. She took another deep breath and sat down, adjusting her hands over the keys. The room grew a little quieter as the others leaned in, curious, waiting for her to fail. Her fingers hovered for a moment, unsure if she could remember the chords, the notes, the flow of music she had once known so well. And then, almost instinctively, she pressed a key. A note rang out, pure and clear. It was simple, but it held a warmth that filled the room in a way no one expected. Lena's eyes closed briefly as she let herself feel the sound. Remembering the melodies she had once played with ease, she began slowly, with a gentle tune, almost like a lullaby. It was soft at first, cautious, as if testing the waters. The staff members exchanged glances, some chuckling nervously, expecting her to stumble, to make a mistake. But the music continued, flowing smoothly from one note to another, her fingers moving with surprising confidence. Lena was no longer just a quiet woman in the corner. She was a musician, a storyteller, speaking through the keys in a language that transcended words. The laughter died down. Eyes widened. One by one, the staff stopped teasing and leaned in, captivated by the unexpected beauty of what they were hearing. The melody grew richer, more intricate, as Lena's memory of the piano and her training returned in full force. She had not played for years, but the music was in her, ingrained in her fingers, in her heart. Each note carried emotion, history, and a depth that could not be faked. The room, once filled with teasing, now held a stunned silence, broken only by the soft echoes of the piano. Even the owner, who had been watching from a distance, moved closer, drawn by the sound. He had seen many musicians over the years, some professional, some amateur, but there was something in Lena's playing that made him pause. It was not just skill, it was honesty, passion, and an authenticity that touched something deep in the soul. Lena continued to play, feeling the music flow through her, washing away the embarrassment and the pressure. She was no longer performing for anyone but herself, and yet, paradoxically, everyone around her felt the impact. The notes were not flashy or showy, but they were full of life, carrying a story she had never spoken aloud. And as she played, she felt a quiet joy that she had almost forgotten, a joy that reminded her of who she really was. Beneath the simplicity everyone assumed, time seemed to stretch. What had begun as a few moments of reluctant performance became an immersion in sound and feeling. Lena's eyes remained closed, her mind entirely focused on the music. She did not notice the smiles spreading across faces, the hands resting on the table in awe, or the subtle nods of respect from those who had mocked her just moments before. For Lena, this was a return, a small but profound reclamation of a part of herself that she had hidden away for too long. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the room held its breath for a second longer than usual. And then, slowly, a wave of astonishment swept through the staff. Some whispered to one another, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Others simply stared, eyes wide, as if seeing her for the first time. The owner approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. I didn't know," he said softly, almost to himself. "I didn't know you could do this." Lena opened her eyes, feeling a flush of both relief and embarrassment. She had faced the teasing, the laughter, the expectation, and come out the other side. She had played not to prove herself to anyone, but because the music had called her back, even in the most unexpected place. And in doing so, she had shown everyone, in a way words never could, that there was more to her than anyone had imagined. That evening ended differently than anyone expected. The teasing had stopped. The laughter had changed tone from ridicule to wonder. And for Lena, it was the beginning of something quiet but profound, the realization that her talent, her passion, her true self, had never been lost. It had only been waiting for the right moment to be seen, and tonight, that moment had finally come. The moment Lena's fingers left the keys, a strange energy lingered in the room. The soft echoes of the piano seemed to hover in the air, wrapping around every table and chair. No one spoke at first, as if the music had cast a gentle spell, holding everyone in awe. Lena herself sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap, unsure if she should feel proud or embarrassed. She hadn't intended to impress anyone, yet now, after those few minutes, all eyes were on her. Some faces reflected shock, others disbelief, and a few showed admiration she had never seen directed at her before. It was one of the younger staff members who finally broke the silence. Wait a minute," they said, their voice low and almost hesitant, as if afraid that speaking would shatter something magical. You actually played that." Their eyes searched Lena's face, trying to read her reaction. "Yes," Lena said softly, almost apologetically. She didn't want to boast, didn't want the attention, but the truth had to come out. I used to play when I was younger. I stopped a long time ago." Her voice was quiet, almost fragile, yet there was a calm honesty in it that made people stop and listen. The teasing group, the ones who had pushed her to sit at the piano in the first place, shifted uncomfortably. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had vanished, replaced by a nervous tension. They had expected a failure, a few awkward notes that they could laugh at. Instead, they had witnessed something extraordinary, and now they had to confront the fact that they had misjudged her entirely. "Years ago?" Another staff member asked, curiosity edging their voice. What do you mean? How long?" Lena hesitated. She wanted to explain, wanted to share the story of the music that had filled her childhood, but she also feared that no one would truly understand. She had spent so long hiding this part of herself, believing that it didn't matter in the real world. "A long time," she said simply. "I studied music as a child. My parents, we didn't have much, and I had to stop. Life just took over." The words hung in the air. For a moment, no one knew what to say. Life had taken over. That simple phrase carried weight, a quiet story of sacrifice and hidden talent. The staff members who had mocked her were beginning to understand that Lena's life had been more complex than they ever imagined. They had only seen her as quiet and simple, never thinking that behind her gentle demeanor was a person who had once dreamed big, who had worked hard and let go of her dreams out of necessity. One of them, the one who had been the loudest in teasing her, finally spoke, their voice softer now, tinged with embarrassment. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just thought it would be funny." They looked down. At the floor, clearly uncomfortable with the reality that they had been cruel, even if unintentionally. Lena nodded, accepting the apology with quiet grace. She didn't want to hold a grudge. In her heart, she understood that people often judged what they didn't understand. She had been quiet, reserved, and different, and that had made her an easy target. But she also knew that this moment was changing something, not just for them, but for herself as well. The owner of the restaurant, who had been standing nearby in silent observation, stepped closer. His eyes were wide, and there was a visible shift in his demeanor. He had seen many employees over the years, many musicians, many performers, but something about Lena's playing had struck a chord deep inside him. That was beautiful, he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. I didn't know you had this talent. Have you ever played professionally? Lena shook her head. No, she said quietly. I only played when I was a child. I never had the chance to continue. Life just moved in a different direction. Her voice held a mix of sadness and acceptance. She had made peace with her past, but the memory of those lost years still brought a small ache to her heart. The owner studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Well, talent like that shouldn't be hidden. Not in a place like this. I think people would love to hear more of your music. Lena's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and uncertainty. She hadn't considered performing in front of anyone again. The thought of playing regularly, of letting her music be heard by others, felt both exciting and terrifying. She had spent so long keeping her talent private that the idea of sharing it openly was almost unimaginable. Yet deep down, a small spark of hope flickered. Maybe this was the moment she had been waiting for, even if she hadn't realized it. The staff members began to speak among themselves, their voices low but filled with newfound respect. She's incredible, one whispered. I can't believe we laughed at her. Another nodded, shaking their head in disbelief. All this time, and we never knew. We thought she was just simple, but she's amazing. Lena watched them, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen not just for the work she did every day, but for who she truly was. The quiet woman who had been underestimated, overlooked, and judged without understanding was finally being recognized for her talent. And while the initial attention had been uncomfortable, she realized that it could also be the beginning of something new, something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for in years. As the evening went on, the restaurant slowly emptied, leaving only a few lingering customers and the staff who had been witness to Lena's unexpected performance. The piano sat quietly in the corner, its keys now imbued with the memory of her music. Lena returned to her usual tasks, wiping tables and arranging chairs, but there was a subtle shift in the way she moved. She held herself differently, with a quiet confidence that had not been there before. The teasing, the laughter, the pressure, they had all been transformed into something else entirely. Recognition, respect, and the possibility of a new beginning. One of the staff members approached her cautiously, still looking a little unsure of themselves. Do you think you could play again sometime? They asked, their voice hesitant but sincere. We'd really like to hear more. Lena smiled softly. It was a small, private smile, but it carried a sense of promise. Maybe, she said quietly. She didn't want to commit to anything yet, but the idea of playing again, of sharing her music, no longer felt like an impossible dream. It felt possible. And for Lena, that was enough for now. Later, after the restaurant had closed and the last of the staff had gone home, Lena remained behind for a few minutes, sitting at the piano alone. The room was quiet, filled only with the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her. She let her fingers drift over the keys, playing softly for herself this time, No one was watching. No one was judging. It was just her and the music, and for the first time in years, she felt truly free. As she played, memories of her childhood flooded back, the lessons she had taken, the afternoons spent practicing by the window while the sun set over the fields, the feeling of pride when she mastered a difficult piece. All of it came rushing back as she realized that the music had never left her. It had only been waiting, quietly, patiently, until the moment when she could embrace it again. In that quiet, solitary moment, Lena made a silent promise to herself. She would not let her talent remain hidden any longer. She would play, even if only for herself at first. She would reclaim the part of her life that had been put aside, the part that had brought her joy and a sense of purpose. And perhaps, in time, she would share it with others too. The next morning, Lena arrived at work with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The memory of the previous evening's music lingered in her mind, and she found herself humming softly as she moved between tables. The staff greeted her differently, now not with teasing, but with curiosity and respect. There was a quiet acknowledgement in their eyes, a recognition that Lena was more than she had seemed, more than the quiet, simple woman they had assumed her to be. Throughout the day, snippets of conversation floated toward her, small questions about the piano, suggestions for her to play again, and shy compliments from the staff who had witnessed her talent. Lena responded politely, with her usual humility, as she felt a growing sense of confidence. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her music could be a part of her life once more, where her talent could be recognized and appreciated. That evening, as the restaurant filled with customers once again, Lena felt a quiet thrill. The piano sat in the corner, waiting. She knew that at some point, someone might ask her to play, and this time she would not feel the same fear or hesitation. She had faced the laughter and emerged on the other side, and now she carried with her a newfound strength. The day ended, as it often did, with the staff closing up and the restaurant falling silent. But for Lena, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The simple act of sitting at the piano, the feeling of the keys under her fingers, and the memory of the awe in the eyes of those around her had ignited something inside her, a quiet determination to embrace the music that had always been a part of her. Lena understood, finally, that talent could not be hidden forever. Even in the most ordinary of places, even in the face of teasing and doubt, the truth of one's abilities would eventually shine through. And for Lena, that truth had revealed itself in the most unexpected, beautiful way. The piano waited for her, and she would answer its call. The next few days at the restaurant felt different for Lena. The usual routine was the same: serving customers, cleaning tables, and making sure everything ran smoothly, but the air carried a subtle shift. There was a quiet curiosity in the staff's behavior, a new awareness that Lena was not the same quiet, simple woman they had always assumed. Even small gestures, like a lingering glance or a soft smile, hinted at the respect that had begun to replace the teasing and casual mockery. Lena noticed it all, but she chose to move quietly, as she always had. She wasn't sure how to react to the change. She had grown used to being invisible, and now, being noticed felt unfamiliar and a little unnerving. That evening, as the restaurant began to fill for dinner, Lena found herself drawn toward the piano once more. It had sat in the corner for years, mostly ignored, yet it seemed to call to her, as if aware that she had begun to rediscover the part of herself she had almost forgotten. She wasn't planning to play in front of anyone this time. She just wanted to feel the keys beneath her fingers, to remind herself that the music was still inside her. But as soon as she sat down, she realized she wasn't alone. One of the staff members, the younger woman who had been the most hesitant when Lena played the first time, stood nearby, watching quietly. "Do you want to play again?" she asked softly, as if afraid of intruding. Lena looked at her, and then at the piano, and nodded, a faint smile forming on her lips. "Just a little," she said. "I haven't played in a while." Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, and then, as if remembering a long-forgotten rhythm, they began to move. The first notes were soft, tentative, but soon the music flowed steadily, effortlessly, like a river that had been dammed for years, finally finding its path. This time, Lena allowed herself to play without fear, without worrying about what others thought. The melody came naturally, carrying with it all the memories and emotions she had kept hidden for so long. As she played, more staff members gathered around, drawn by the sound. The teasing that had existed before had vanished entirely, replaced by a quiet reverence. Even the customers, who had come for a simple dinner, stopped what they were doing to listen. The music filled the room in a way that words could not describe. Lena's fingers moved with a confidence she hadn't realized she still possessed. Her touch light but precise, each note carefully placed to tell a story. For Lena, it was as if she had been transported back to her childhood, to the afternoons she had spent practicing in her village. She remembered the hours she had devoted to learning, the challenges she had faced, and the joy she had felt when she finally mastered a difficult piece. Those memories were all there, flowing through her fingers and into the room. The music was not just sound, it was emotion, it was history. It was a part of her soul that had long been hidden. The owner of the restaurant, who had been standing at a distance during the first performance, stepped closer this time. His eyes were wide with amazement. He had seen many musicians in his life, some trained and some amateur, but there was something in Lena's playing that was different. It wasn't just skill, it was authenticity, it was passion, it was a story told without words. He found himself leaning against the table, unable to look away, completely absorbed in the sound. The staff, too, were silent, watching with a mix of admiration and disbelief. They had never imagined that someone they had once mocked could possess such talent. One of the young men who had been the loudest in teasing her approached cautiously. I didn't know," he said quietly. You're amazing." There was a genuine awe in his voice, and Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't need their praise, but she appreciated that they could finally see her for who she really was. As the evening wore on, Lena continued to play, allowing herself to explore the piano in ways she hadn't done in years. She experimented with new melodies, blending soft classical patterns with improvisations that reflected her own personality. Each note carried a depth of feeling. Each chord resonated with honesty. The music wasn't just entertainment, it was a conversation, a way of sharing her experiences and emotions without speaking a single word. The customers began to notice, too. A few approached the staff quietly, asking who was playing. When they were told it was Lena, the quiet woman who worked as a cleaner, their eyes widened. Some couldn't believe that someone so unassuming could have such incredible skill. They lingered longer at their tables, sipping drinks slowly, listening as the piano filled the room. The restaurant had transformed from a simple dining space into a small concert hall, alive with music and emotion. Lena didn't play for recognition, but she couldn't deny that it felt good to be appreciated. For so long, she had hidden her talent, believing it didn't matter, believing that people would never care. But now, seeing the wonder on their faces, she realized that her music had the power to touch others, to move them in ways words never could. It was a revelation, one that brought both pride and humility. After a particularly long piece, Lena paused, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She looked up and saw the staff exchanging glances, nodding to each other quietly. There was a newfound respect in their eyes, a recognition that Lena was not just a quiet worker. They had underestimated her, and they knew it now. One of the staff members whispered to another, She's incredible." We never knew. Even the owner spoke again, his voice soft but full of admiration. Lena, you have a gift. You shouldn't hide it. People would love to hear more of your music. You could. You could really inspire others. Lena felt a small smile tug at her lips. She hadn't thought of herself as someone who could inspire, but the idea wasn't unpleasant. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, something she hadn't allowed herself to dream of in years. The evening drew to a close, and the staff began cleaning up as usual. Lena returned to her usual duties, but there was a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She moved with a quiet confidence, her head held a little higher, her steps a little lighter. The piano had reminded her of a part of herself that she had long forgotten, and now she carried it with her in everything she did. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Whenever she found a moment, Lena would sit at the piano and play. Sometimes it was for herself, sometimes for the staff, and occasionally for the customers who lingered long enough to listen. With each performance, her confidence grew, and the music became a more natural part of her daily life. She began to experiment with more complex pieces, blending different styles and creating melodies that were uniquely her own. The staff began to encourage her more openly. You should play more often, one of them said one evening, smiling. People love it. Another added, you have a real talent. You shouldn't hide it. Lena listened to their words, feeling a mixture of gratitude and humility. She didn't need constant encouragement, but it was comforting to know that her music was valued, that it brought something positive into the lives of others. One afternoon, as Lena was preparing the restaurant for the evening, a small group of regular customers approached the staff. We heard someone playing the piano here the other night, one said. We couldn't believe it. Who is it? The staff exchanged knowing glances before pointing toward Lena. That's her, they said. The quiet woman who works here. She's incredible. Lena felt a flush of surprise and embarrassment. She hadn't intended to perform for recognition, but hearing the words of genuine admiration was touching. The customers lingered, asking if she would play for them sometime. She nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. For the first time in years, she realized that sharing her music with others could be something she enjoyed, something that brought joy not just to herself, but to those around her. That evening, as the restaurant filled once again, Lena sat at the piano with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingers, and the music flowed naturally. This time, she didn't play cautiously or timidly. She allowed herself to be fully immersed in the melodies, letting each note carry her emotions, her memories, and her passion. The staff and customers alike were captivated, drawn into the music as if it were a story unfolding before their eyes. For Lena, the experience was transformative. She realized that her talent was not something to hide or be ashamed of. It was a part of who she was, a gift that had survived despite the challenges and sacrifices of her life. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge between her past and present, a way to connect with others and share a piece of herself that words could never capture. As the evening drew to a close, Lena reflected on how far she had come in just a few short days. The teasing that had once made her feel small and unworthy had been replaced by admiration and respect. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and discovered a new sense of confidence. The journey was only beginning, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about what lay ahead. Lena knew that there would still be challenges, that not everyone would understand or appreciate her music. But she also knew that she had the strength to persevere, the skill to create beauty, and the courage to share it with the world. The piano had reminded her of who she was, and she was determined not to let that part of herself fade away again, not in the quiet moments after the re. The following week at the restaurant brought a new rhythm to Lena's life. Each day, as she moved between tables and cleaned up after customers, there was an unspoken awareness of her presence. The staff, who had once treated her as invisible, now glanced at her with admiration, sometimes whispering quietly among themselves about the melodies she had played the night before. Lena carried herself differently, though she tried not to show it. Her movements were still gentle and careful, her smile quiet. But beneath it all, there was a steady confidence that had begun to grow within her. The piano in the corner had become more than a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of her talent, of a part of herself that had been hidden away for years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Each time she walked past it, a small flutter of anticipation rose in her chest. Sometimes she would pause, touch the keys softly, and feel the memory of the music flow through her. She was rediscovering herself, one note at a time. That evening, the restaurant was particularly busy. A group of regular customers had arrived early, chatting excitedly about the previous night's music. They had become fascinated with the quiet woman who worked among them, who could create such beauty from an old, worn piano. When the staff signaled that the piano might be played again, the customers leaned forward eagerly, their eyes bright with anticipation. Lena approached the piano cautiously, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and nervousness. She hadn't expected so many people to want to hear her, but she reminded herself that she was no longer performing for mockery or judgment. This was for herself, for the music, and for anyone who wanted to listen. She sat down, brushing her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the smoothness beneath her touch. The first notes were gentle, tentative, almost as if testing the water. But soon the music began to flow freely, each note building on the one before it, weaving a melody that was both intricate and delicate. The room grew quiet, the usual clatter of dishes and conversation fading away as the sound filled every corner. Lena's fingers danced across the keys with ease, each movement precise, yet full of emotion. The staff watched in awe, whispering among themselves, She's incredible." Even the customers who had never seen Lena before were captivated. There was something in her playing that transcended the ordinary, a depth of feeling that spoke to anyone who was willing to listen. The music was alive, telling a story that no words could convey, carrying the listeners into a world where only the melody mattered. As Lena played, she felt herself slipping into a state of calm focus. The nervousness that had accompanied her earlier performances faded completely. She was no longer thinking about the audience or their reactions. She was thinking only of the music, allowing it to guide her fingers and her heart. Each chord, each note, became a conversation with herself, a way to express emotions she had long kept hidden. The owner, standing at the edge of the room, could not take his eyes off her. He had expected talent when she first played, but the depth and emotion Lena now displayed went far beyond what he had imagined. He felt a strange mix of pride and wonder, realizing that something extraordinary had been working quietly among them all along. Unnoticed until now, a few of the staff, emboldened by the earlier success, approached cautiously. Could you play something more complex?" one asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lena looked at them, a small smile forming. "If I can remember it," she replied softly, her hands hovering over the keys. And then, without another word, she began to play a piece that was more challenging, more intricate than anything she had attempted in the restaurant before. The music swelled, rising and falling like the tide. Lena's fingers moved with remarkable precision, each note crisp and clear, yet full of warmth. The melody was layered, combining soft, flowing passages with sudden, dramatic flourishes. The listeners could feel the emotion behind each movement, the longing, the joy, the sorrow, and the quiet strength that Lena had cultivated over the years. It was clear to everyone in the room that this was no ordinary performance. Lena was not merely entertaining them. She was sharing a piece of her soul, a story that had been waiting for years to be told. The staff and customers alike were held in a trance, unable to look away or speak, their attention fully captured by the music. For Lena, it was an almost spiritual experience. She had never felt so connected to the piano, to the music, and to the people around her all at once. Every note she played seemed to resonate beyond the walls of the restaurant, reaching into the hearts of those who listened. She realized that she had been holding back, not because she lacked skill, but because she had been afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged. That fear no longer had power over her dot as the piece drew to a close. Lena's hands lingered over the keys, letting the final notes fade into silence. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. Then, gradually, the room erupted into applause. It was not the polite clapping of obligation, but a genuine, heartfelt response to something rare and beautiful. Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and something she could not quite name, a sense of belonging, of finally being recognized for who she truly was. The owner stepped forward, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Lena, that was extraordinary. I don't think anyone here has ever experienced anything like that before. You have a gift, one that shouldn't be hidden. People need to hear this. Lena nodded, feeling a blush rise in her cheeks. She had never sought recognition, but she could not deny the truth in his words. Sharing her music had awakened something within her, and she knew she could not ignore it again. The staff approached her one by one, offering compliments and apologies for their earlier teasing. There was a humility in their voices, a recognition that they had been wrong to judge her. Lena accepted their words quietly, grateful for their understanding. But she knew that this was not about proving herself to anyone. It was about reclaiming a part of her life that she had almost lost dot in the days that followed. More customers began to ask if Lena would play during their visits. The restaurant became known, quietly at first, as the place where the quiet woman played the piano with extraordinary talent. People came not just for the food, but to hear her music, to experience the emotions she could convey with a single note. Lena found herself performing more frequently, each time discovering new depths of expression and creativity. But with recognition came new challenges. Some visitors were skeptical, unable to believe that someone so unassuming could play with such skill. Others were curious, asking questions about her background, her training, and her life outside the restaurant. Lena answered with quiet honesty, careful not to boast, but also refusing to diminish her experiences. She had learned to navigate the world with humility, and now she applied that same principle to her growing reputation. One afternoon, a visitor who introduced himself as a music teacher approached the piano. He had heard about Lena from the staff and had come specifically to witness her playing. He listened silently as she performed a piece she had improvised that day, his eyes narrowing in concentration. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "You have incredible technique," he said, his voice low and serious. "But more than that, you have something rare, a natural ability to convey emotion through music. You could teach others, or even perform professionally if you chose to." Lena felt a mix of emotions, pride, fear, and uncertainty. She had never considered performing outside the restaurant. Her life had been shaped by necessity, by the need to work and survive. But hearing his words made her realize that there was another path, one that she had never dared to explore. She wasn't ready to make decisions yet, but the idea that her music could reach even further than it already had was both thrilling and terrifying. The next evening, Lena sat at the piano, contemplating the possibilities. The restaurant was busier than usual, and she could feel the anticipation in the air. The staff and customers had come to expect her music, and she did not want to disappoint them. But she also wanted to challenge herself. to see how far she could push her skills. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let her fingers find the keys. The music that flowed from her was more daring, more expressive than before. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and rhythm, weaving a complex tapestry of sound that captivated everyone present. The staff watched in awe, some unable to hide their astonishment at how Lina seemed to pour her entire being into each note. The customers, too, were mesmerized, leaning forward in their chairs, holding their breath as the music carried them through a journey of emotion and beauty. By the time Lina finished, the room was silent for a brief, reverent moment. Then applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than before. Lina felt a rush of exhilaration and humility, knowing that she had shared something meaningful. For her, the piano had become not just an instrument, but a bridge connecting her past to her present, her private world to the public, and her own heart to the hearts of everyone listening. As the night ended and the restaurant emptied, Lina remained at the piano for a few quiet minutes. She played softly, for herself alone, savoring the notes and the emotions they carried. The recognition she had received was gratifying, but what mattered most was the connection she felt to the music. After weeks of quietly building her confidence at the restaurant, Lina began to notice changes beyond the walls of her workplace. The soft murmurs of admiration that had first come from her coworkers were now reaching outsiders. A few regular customers had mentioned her playing to friends, praising not just her skill, but the emotion and depth in her music. Soon, more people started visiting the restaurant, not just for meals, but for the chance to hear her play. It was subtle at first, a customer lingering longer, an attentive ear catching her improvisation, but over time, Lina realized that her music was quietly gaining recognition beyond the staff who had once laughed at her. It all began one quiet Thursday evening. The restaurant wasn't crowded, and the air had the calm stillness that Lina often preferred when she played. She sat at the piano, her fingers gently brushing the keys, feeling the familiar warmth of the instrument beneath her touch. The first notes were soft, reflective, almost hesitant, yet carried a subtle energy that hinted at the strength beneath her quiet demeanor. She had grown accustomed to playing for the staff and for regular customers, but that night there was a different kind of anticipation in the air, one she couldn't quite place. As she continued, a small group of people entered quietly, choosing a table near the piano. They didn't announce themselves, and Lina didn't notice them at first. Their presence was almost imperceptible, yet she felt it instinctively, a quiet attention that went beyond casual curiosity. As her music unfolded, she could sense their focus, their eyes turning toward her with a mixture of admiration and surprise. They were captivated, not merely by the technical skill of her fingers, but by the story her music seemed to tell. The first piece she played that evening was one she had improvised, blending soft classical influences with the folk melodies of her childhood. Each note carried an honesty that transcended words. The listeners felt it immediately, a quiet awe settling over the table as her fingers danced across the keys. The staff, who had begun to take her for granted in small ways, stopped what they were doing to watch and listen. Even the customers, who had been indifferent at first, leaned forward, entranced by the unexpected beauty emerging from the corner of the restaurant. When she finished, there was a brief pause, a moment of silence, as everyone processed the music. Then, without warning, the applause erupted. It wasn't polite or obligatory. It was heartfelt, spontaneous, and deeply sincere. Lina's heart thumped in her chest, not from fear, but from the realization that her music had reached new ears, touched new hearts. She looked up to see the group of visitors smiling at her, their eyes bright with wonder. One of them, an older woman with a gentle demeanor, approached after a few moments. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I couldn't help but listen. Your music, it's extraordinary." Where did you learn to play like that? Lena smiled quietly, a soft blush rising to her cheeks. I used to study as a child, she replied simply. Life made me stop, but I've kept playing when I can. The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with appreciation. You have a rare gift. You should share it more widely. People need to hear music like yours. It touches the soul. Lena felt a mixture of pride and hesitation. She had never considered performing outside the safe confines of the restaurant. The thought of exposing herself to a wider audience was both thrilling and terrifying. But hearing her music described in such profound terms planted a seed she couldn't ignore. Over the following days, word of Lena's talent spread quietly but steadily. More customers came with the intention of listening, some bringing friends along to experience the music themselves. The staff noticed the difference immediately. The restaurant felt busier, livelier, yet in a more attentive way than before. People were not just eating, they were listening, savoring the moments when Lena's hands moved across the keys, bringing her emotions to life. With this growing recognition came new challenges. Lena began to feel the weight of expectations she had never faced before. Some customers asked for specific pieces, while others encouraged her to perform for longer periods. The thought of performing for a larger audience, beyond the familiar faces she had grown comfortable with, was daunting. She worried about making mistakes, about losing the intimacy and authenticity that made her music special. Yet, with each note she played, those fears gradually gave way to a quiet determination. She would not allow apprehension to silence her. One evening, as she prepared to play, a young man approached the piano with a notebook in his hand. He introduced himself as a local music promoter who had heard about Lena through friends and wanted to discuss an opportunity. Lena's hands froze briefly over the keys, and a small wave of anxiety washed over her. I don't perform professionally, she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I only play here sometimes. The promoter smiled gently. I understand, he said, but what you do here, it's remarkable. People are talking about it, and I believe your music deserves a wider audience. No pressure, just an invitation to explore what could be possible. Lena looked down at the keys, her fingers brushing lightly over them. The thought of performing outside the restaurant had never occurred to her, yet the idea stirred something. Deep inside, she felt both fear and excitement, a combination that made her heart beat faster. Over the next few days, Lena thought about the offer constantly. She replayed the evening's experience in her mind, remembering the way her music had touched those who listened, the genuine reactions, and the connection she had felt through the piano. She realized that for so long she had hidden her talent, believing it was not important or that no one would care. Now she understood that her music had the power to move people, to inspire them, and perhaps even to change her life. Finally, after much contemplation, Lena made a quiet decision. She would explore the opportunity. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew she had to try. She spoke to the promoter and agreed to a small public performance at a local community event. It was a modest beginning, a chance to step beyond the familiar walls of the restaurant and share her music with a broader audience. The day of the performance arrived, and Lena felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The community hall was small but filled with people she had never seen before. She looked out over the audience and felt a flutter in her chest, the familiar tension of exposure mingling with excitement. Taking a deep breath, she sat at the piano, brushing her fingers over the keys. As she began to play, all her fears melted away. The music carried her forward, each note resonating with clarity and emotion. She allowed herself to be fully immersed, no longer worrying about judgment or expectation. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, listening intently to every movement of her fingers. Lena could feel the connection, the shared emotion, and she realized that this was exactly where she was meant to be. By the end of her first piece, the room erupted in applause. It was louder, more enthusiastic than anything she had experienced. In the restaurant, people stood, some with tears in their eyes, others smiling broadly, all united by the beauty and honesty of her music. Lena's heart swelled with emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and overwhelming gratitude. She had stepped into a new world, and it had embraced her talent with open arms. The promoter approached afterward, his face beaming. "That was incredible," he said. "People are talking about you everywhere. This is only the beginning." Lena smiled quietly, her fingers still resting on the keys. She felt a sense of possibility she had never known before, a glimpse of a life where her music could reach far beyond what she had imagined. Over the following weeks, more invitations came. Lena was asked to perform at small gatherings, community events, and even local cultural festivals. Each experience was different, presenting new challenges and opportunities, but she approached them all with the same quiet determination. She had learned to embrace her talent, to trust in her abilities, and to share her music with authenticity and courage. Throughout it all, Lena never forgot the restaurant where it had begun. She continued to work there, balancing her daily responsibilities with her growing performance schedule. The piano in the corner remained her anchor, a place where she could practice, reflect, and reconnect with herself. It was a reminder of the journey she had undertaken, from the quiet woman once overlooked to the musician, whose music now touched the hearts of many. The recognition she received did not change her humility. Lena remained gentle, thoughtful, and kind, never allowing attention to make her arrogant or dismissive. She understood that her talent was a gift, and she treated it with respect and care. Each performance was an opportunity to connect with others, to share a part of herself, and to create moments of beauty and emotion. As Lena's reputation grew, she began to receive messages from people who had been moved by her music. Some shared personal stories, expressing gratitude for the comfort and inspiration her playing had brought them. Others asked for advice or guidance, hoping to learn from her experiences. Lena responded with quiet humility, offering encouragement and support, knowing that her journey could help others find their own paths. Through all of this, Lena realized that her life had changed in ways she had never anticipated. The simple act of playing the piano, once forced upon her as a source of ridicule, had become a tea. Lena awoke that morning with a quiet sense of anticipation. Her life had changed so much in the past few months that even small moments felt significant. The memory of her first audience outside the restaurant, the applause, the warmth of recognition, and the way her music had touched people lingered in her mind. Today, she knew, was going to be different. It was the day she would perform at a larger venue, in front of a community she had never imagined reaching, and she could feel both excitement and nervousness coiling in her chest. She arrived at the venue early, giving herself time to sit with the piano, to feel its keys beneath her fingers, and to center herself. The hall was quiet, the seats empty, but she could already sense the energy in the air, the promise of what was to come. For Lena, this was not just a performance, it was a declaration. She had been underestimated, overlooked, even ridiculed for her abilities, but now she had the chance to show the world the depth of her talent, the authenticity of her music, and the story that had always lived quietly within her. As she prepared to play, she thought back to the moment that had changed everything. The evening at the restaurant, when she had been forced to sit at the piano as a joke. What had once been an uncomfortable humiliation had become the beginning of her journey. It was a reminder that life sometimes has unexpected ways of leading us to our true path, even through moments of discomfort and doubt. She took a deep breath, letting the memory give her strength instead of fear. When the audience began to arrive, Lena felt a flutter of nerves. People from all walks of life filled the seats, friends who had come to support her, strangers who had heard of her talent, and even some local music enthusiasts curious to witness the quiet woman who had captured so many hearts with her piano. As she looked out over the crowd, she realized that this moment was bigger than she had ever imagined, and yet it did not scare her as it might have in the past. She was ready. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the hall. Lena positioned herself at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. She paused for a moment, letting the silence settle, feeling the weight of the anticipation. Then, with a deep exhale, she began to play. The first notes were soft, careful, almost conversational, as if she were inviting the audience into her world. The melody flowed naturally, each note a bridge between her past and present, a story told without words. As she played, Lena allowed herself to fully immerse in the music. Her fingers moved effortlessly, guided by instinct and emotion rather than thought. She wove together delicate passages with bold, expressive chords, blending the influences of her childhood with the improvisational freedom she had discovered over the past months. The hall seemed to breathe with her, each listener drawn into the narrative she created with her hands. The audience was captivated. No one whispered, no one fidgeted. Every ear, every gaze was fixed on Lena and the piano, attuned to story, being told through each note. She could feel the connection, the way the music resonated within them, and it filled her with a quiet, profound satisfaction. She had never played for recognition or fame. She had played because it was a part of her. Now, in this hall filled with attentive hearts, she realized that sharing her gift had the power to touch lives in ways she could never have anticipated. Halfway through her performance, Lena closed her eyes. Memories of her childhood flooded. Her mind, the small room where she had first learned to play, the hours of practice, the quiet moments of triumph and frustration. She thought of the family who had supported her, the friends who had doubted her, and the coworkers who had once laughed. Each memory infused her music with a depth that was impossible to fabricate. The hall seemed to disappear. All that existed was her, the piano, and the invisible thread connecting her to everyone listening. One particularly challenging section required a delicate balance of precision and emotion. Lena's hands moved with a quiet determination, striking each note with careful intent, yet allowing the emotion to breathe. She felt her heart synchronize with the rhythm, her mind fully focused yet free. For a moment, she forgot the audience, the venue, the expectations. There was only the music and the truth it carried. When the final chord resonated and lingered in the air, a silence fell, profound and heavy, as if the audience collectively held their breath to savor the lingering notes. And slowly, applause began. At first, it was tentative, soft, but it quickly grew, swelling into a full, heartfelt response. People rose from their seats, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles. Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest that was unlike anything she had experienced. She had not sought this moment, yet it felt like the culmination of every small, hidden choice she had ever made. The decision to keep playing, the courage to perform despite fear, and the quiet perseverance that had led her here. The applause continued as Lena stood, bowing gently to the audience. She felt humbled, not by their recognition, but by the shared experience she had created. Music had always been her way of expressing herself, but this was the first time she had truly understood its impact. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to share it, to embrace it fully, that allowed it to resonate. And in that hall, she had done exactly that. After the performance, many audience members approached her. Some shared personal stories, how her music had reminded them of loved ones, inspired them to pursue their own passions, or simply brought them comfort in a difficult time. Lena listened quietly, offering smiles and soft words of gratitude. Each interaction reinforced the truth she had begun to understand. Her music was not just for herself. It was a gift to be shared, a way to touch lives and create moments of beauty. The local music promoter, who had first invited her to perform, was there, beaming with pride. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "People will remember this night. Your talent isn't just impressive, it's transformative. You have the power to inspire on a much larger scale." Lena nodded, her heart full. She had never sought fame or acclaim, but she understood now that her music had value. Beyond the private joy it had given her, it had the power to connect, to heal, and to uplift. Over the next few weeks, Lena's life took on a new rhythm. She continued to work at the restaurant, but her music became an increasingly important part of her identity. Invitations to perform at local events, small concerts, and community gatherings grew steadily. Each experience brought new challenges and opportunities, and Lena approached them with the quiet determination that had always guided her. She played not for recognition, but because it was an essential part of who she was, and the world responded with admiration and appreciation. Through it all, Lena remained grounded. She never forgot the humble beginnings that had shaped her, the quiet moments at the restaurant, the teasing coworkers, the small victories of rediscovering her talent. These memories reminded her to remain humble, kind, and true to herself. She treated her growing reputation not as a source of pride, but as a responsibility, a way to share the beauty and emotion that music could bring. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a community festival, Lena walked home alone under the soft glow of streetlights. She reflected on how far she had come from the quiet woman who had been underestimated and mocked, to a musician whose music had touched countless hearts. The journey had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, fear, and hesitation. Yet she had persevered. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Back at home, Lena sat quietly at her piano, now a trusted companion in her journey. She played softly, not for an audience, but for herself, allowing the notes to carry her thoughts, memories, and emotions. Each melody was a testament to the path she had taken, the obstacles she had overcome, and the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. She played until the room was filled with the echoes of her music, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. In the days that followed, Lena began to teach a few local children who expressed interest in learning the piano. She found joy in sharing her knowledge, in guiding others as they discovered their own musical voices. It was a way to give back, to honor the journey she had undertaken, and to ensure that her experiences could inspire the next generation. Watching the children struggle, succeed, and find their own confidence reminded her of her own path, and she felt a quiet pride in their progress, now through teaching, performing, and continuing to play for herself. Lena realized that her music had become more than a talent. It was a lifeline, a bridge, and a source of connection. It allowed her to express what words could not, to reach into the hearts of others, and to find her place in the world. The woman who had once been overlooked and underestimated had transformed into someone who could inspire, move, and lead through the simple yet profound power of music. One evening, after returning from a small local concert, Lena walked into the restaurant where it had all begun. The familiar scent of the kitchen, the warm wooden tables, and the quiet hum of conversation welcomed her. She approached the piano in the corner and touched the keys lightly, feeling a wave of nostalgia and gratitude. It was here that her journey had started, here that she had been forced to play, and here that she had discovered the depth of